What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. It's time for Sunday Scaries. Thanks for tuning in. See a lot of people in the chat already. Let me know how your weekend went. Mine has been pretty dang good. Friday, I went out in the French Quarter and had some fun. And then yesterday, I didn't really do much. I watched this documentary called Slay, which is about animals used in the fashion industry. Let me know if you've seen that. It's free on Tubi right now. And speaking of the fashion industry, this week I'm very excited that my friend Mark is on, and he was working on the Marc Jacobs campaign really hard, and there's been some big developments there. So I wanted to bring him on, but first I want to tell you a bit about him and how I met him. So I met Mark probably about a year and a half ago at an animal rights march in Atlanta. And then we really got to know each other at an animal activism mentorship convergence in DC that I went to last March. And since then, we just became really good friends. He's awesome. He's one of the best activists I know. Like, if you spend any time with Mark, like wherever you go, he's trying to do activism. We went to this coffee shop for breakfast in New York City, and he brought flyers and asked if he could put them up. He wears a hat that says, or maybe it's a shirt that says, "Ask me how to get involved in animal rights activism," which I don't think has a very good success rate. But the fact that he wears it is really cool. So yeah, I love Mark, and I'm so excited to introduce him on this channel. And I think that one of the things that I want to start doing with my streams is to have people on who are really instrumental in animal rights, but don't necessarily have big social media presences. So let's bring him on. What's up, Mark? How you doing tonight?
Hey Natalie, good to be on. Good to see you.
Nice. Good to see you as well. All right. So, just to start off, can you tell us a bit about your background and how you got involved in animal rights?
Yeah, I'm originally from Maryland, and Maryland's a big crab eating state for those who don't know. And it wasn't really something that my family was as into, but I remember seeing it a couple times as a kid and being really troubled by it. And then at some point as an adult, I was at a family gathering where I saw crabs being cooked alive. And it had been a long time since I'd seen that. It was really troubling. I kind of put it out of my head, and but then the next day, I didn't connect it at the time, but the next day I was just randomly thinking about, what we do to animals, and, how I don't want animals to suffer. But I was recognizing that they were suffering in part due to my choices. And so I kind of initially started by making a lot of personal lifestyle changes to try to help animals. But from there moved into, activism, more targeting at corporations who really hold a lot of the power in those areas.
Yeah, I love that answer because, well, the crab part I especially relate to because in Louisiana here they boil crawfish alive, and
Mm.
it's like thousands of crawfish are just boiled alive, and then it's this big celebration. No one really thinks about the suffering they go through and the fact that they can live for up to 10 years, right? And we're killing them when they're babies, essentially. And then also the fact that you start with this individual change, kind of realize like, hey, it's not quite enough to remove yourself from the system of animal exploitation. We have to do something to overthrow it. So I want to read a statement by our good friend Marc Jacobs and then talk a bit about the campaign. He said, bullying. Bullying is the use of force, coercion, hurtful teasing, or threat to abuse, aggressively dominate, or intimidate. The behavior is often repeated and habitual. One essential prerequisite is the perception by the bully or by others of an imbalance of physical or social power. This imbalance distinguishes bullying from conflict. Bullying is a subcategory of aggressive behavior characterized by hostile intent, imbalance of, and the repetition over a period of time. Wikipedia. So, why do you feel the need to bully hardworking citizens like Marc Jacobs into doing what you want? Isn't Marc Jacobs the true victim in this situation?
I loved Marc Jacobs' statement. I actually really did. I thought it was really funny, really good.
It's hilarious. It's so
I
good.
I thought it was funny that he had the section in there about imbalance of power. It's like, hey, me and my 400 Instagram followers, versus, I don't know. I think he's worth like, a third of a billion or something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, certainly, I think the real imbalance of power is what's happening to the animals on these fur farms, and the fur industry and the designers who purchase from the fur industry are really to blame for what's happening here. So, I think bullying would be a soft way to put what goes on, but obviously these animals are raised in horrible confinement, and the ways they kill them are probably too graphic to discuss right now. But just horrible stuff. So I think that Marc Jacobs should have done the right thing on his own. He shouldn't have needed the bullies like me to come in and bully him into doing the right thing. And most designers did cave with much less pressure than I think it took for Marc Jacobs. Most of them did the right thing a little bit easier. So I do feel like it didn't have to be this way, but I actually loved his statement. I have no problem with it.
It's just really funny, right? Like, and that's just the statement in the Instagram post, but he says a lot more in the caption, like, I feel your hate, anger, and pain. I cannot sit back and watch the unjust and hostile attacks, blah, blah, blah. So yeah, I think the whole thing is absolutely fucking ridiculous. Like, he is not the victim here. And that's what we see the meat industry and the fashion industry do, is they paint themselves as the victims, even though they're, yeah, literally torturing animals by the millions, which is insane. So good job. So yeah, I kind of want to ask, can you tell us a bit about like finding out that you won the campaign? Because when I last saw you in DC, that wasn't that long ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, and you were not feeling very confident that you were going to win this campaign soon. You thought that you were going to win eventually, but not that it would happen this quickly. So can you tell us a bit about like the day that you won and what that felt like and some of the events preceding that victory?
Yeah, very emotional experience. I think there is a video that I'm in on Animal Activism Mentorship's YouTube channel. At the very end, you can see a little bit of all of us having our reactions to winning. But I think a lot of us just, we invested a lot in it. So many people invested so much in this campaign, and we asked so many people to invest in this campaign. So it coming out, it being a success relatively quickly just meant a lot. And knowing what that means for the fur industry was really significant. But it was really interesting because there was a 10-day convergence. A bunch of activists came into town through Animal Activism Mentorship to help us out with this campaign. And this was actually on the last day of that. So I had some hope that having all these activists in town putting additional pressure on would maybe we'd have a chance to win it during that 10 days. But once we were kind of at the end of it, I really had lost that. Actually, early in the week, I told one of the other organizers, I said, hey, like, we should probably prep a press release and, the social media graphic in case we win it this week. But by the end, it was like, why would he give up now at the end of the 10 days? Because he probably knows from social media that it's 10 days of action, and then it's going back to the routine, 7-person protests that we were doing before. And I don't know, it was really cool to win that way. And there were so many like newer activists even, or at least activists who were kind of new to some of these tactics that were also in town for this, who all got to play a role in it. And I thought that was kind of exciting too. We had people who got arrested that week on just ridiculous charges, but then they come back, hours after getting out of jail and show up again. And so they got to have that win too. I don't know. It was just a really amazing experience.
That's so awesome. Yeah, I was so bummed that I couldn't go because I have to go to New York City next week for a wedding. So I couldn't come for the convergence and then also the wedding. But yeah, it looked super fun. All the videos, everyone looks really happy. And there were a lot of people that I didn't recognize. So I think it's great that this is bringing new activists in, and especially like giving them that win right off the bat. Also, I notice you plugged Animal Activism Mentorship a little bit, and I just want to plug them again. I love AAM. I think they're a great organization. I am one of the mentors for AAM. So if anyone watching is unsure of how to get started with animal activism, then check out Animal Activism Mentorship. They can pair you with a mentor, and we make the process really easy and really fun. So kind of zooming out a little bit in terms of the fur industry, why do you think this Marc Jacobs win is a big deal?
Yeah, honestly, the win has a lot less to do in this case with how much fur he was selling, which was relatively little. He was kind of back and forth on selling fur. And it has a lot more to do with the cultural impact that it has on the fur industry, and potentially on his parent company, LVMH. So Marc Jacobs is, I would say, the most influential, active American fashion designer, incredibly influential. And so what he does sets a lot of the tone for the fashion industry. And a lot of the stuff within fashion is somewhat derivative. This applies to newer designers coming up, designers in other countries. Like a lot of it is them looking to people like Marc Jacobs for what they're going to do. And there's just going to be a huge ripple of impact from him not selling fur, from him committing to not sell fur again. And when he does it, even if it's not frequent, it sends that signal to other designers that this is an acceptable thing to do, especially from a designer like him who kind of maintains more of a social justice friendly image. If he's doing it, people feel okay doing it. Then the other piece of it is he is a part of LVMH, and they're kind of the last like really big group, major fashion conglomerate that still sells fur. And so that him, and he's very influential within that company, so that matters a lot as well. So honesty, it had more to do with his influence than on the specific amount of fur he was selling.
Yeah, he was kind of back and forth. He was claiming that he wasn't selling any fur, but then there would be fur trims on his site. So it all seemed really confusing. It was like he kind of didn't want to be seen as using fur, but then also he didn't want to adopt the policy that he wouldn't. So, I mean, do
Yeah.
you know anything about like why he was doing that sort of stuff, or is it all basically speculation?
It's a lot of speculation. He had told an activist privately a couple years back, I think it was, that he wouldn't be using fur again. And then he brought it back in a collaboration with Fendi. They also claimed that that was just upcycled fur, but when we called customer service, pretending like we wanted to buy this hat, they tell us it's new fur.
Yeah.
And, Marc Jacobs was also saying that it wasn't even for sale. But again, customer service was telling us that, or sales rather, was telling us that we could in fact buy this. So, and you can
That's
find used
ridiculous.
versions of it now on the internet. So clearly it was sold. Um, I think that there may have been some internal pressure as well. Someone close to Marc Jacobs told us that he wasn't even allowed to go for free by his parent company. I think that may not have been true, or maybe that's now changed as a result of the campaign. But it is a lot of speculation because they don't like to tell anti-fur activists,
Yeah, exactly.
what's going on in their head.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Very cool. Okay, so over 100 billion animals are tortured in the food industry every year. Why should activists focus on fur? How cute do animals have to be for you to care about them?
Yeah, great question. And I really care a lot about the animals killed in the food industry too. But I think that we have to start breaking animal exploitation down, going for the easier targets first. And fur is an issue that the public is generally behind us on. There's a lot of reasons for this. There were some great public information campaigns done through, the 80s and into the present. It's also something that most of us don't really have much involvement with, like unless you were pretty rich, you've probably never even owned fur. So it's a little bit more palatable to the public. I think the majority of people do support even banning fur. So we kind of have the public on our side, and we can use this to build a model for animal liberation where we go for the weakest links first, and we kind of hope that starts like the domino effect. Because if we can't be an entire industry, especially one as unpopular as fur, then I think we're forever going to be stuck kind of begging for the welfare scraps from corporations, basically trying to convince them that maybe it'll be more profitable to exploit animals in this way, which is a little bit better. And I'm not against those campaigns, but I think that we won't be able to move beyond those campaigns if we don't get the ability and build the tools and activist power to actually destroy an entire industry.
Yeah, I think whenever I was kind of first thinking about this stuff, that was the argument that was most compelling for me is if we can't bring down fur, there's no way we can bring down animal agriculture. I mean, the public is pretty against fur. And yeah, like you said, most people can't afford it. They don't interact with it. It's known as this rich people thing. Some people support fur, but it's definitely not the majority. And we found that in our ballot initiatives in Denver, we got the two. We have the slaughterhouse ban and then the fur ban. We're very confident that the fur ban will pass, and we're kind of using that as a foot in the door technique to pass the slaughterhouse ban because that public support is there. And I think that when we have public support, it's good to lean into that. I understand that a lot of people don't want to do that, or maybe it like kind of feels worse to be like, oh, let's use these meat eaters to our advantage. We would rather just have people go vegan. But that doesn't seem to be as effective. But if everyone were vegan, no one would use fur. So why not focus on turning everyone vegan instead?
It's a good thought. I think that if we had the ability to focus on. I've honestly done a lot of time on outreach. I'm trying to get people to go vegan. I got a couple of my family members to go vegan, which is amazing. But we've been doing that for decades now, and the percentage of like vegans in the population is pretty static, but then the population is increasing. So there, that whatever percentage that is non-vegan, the vast majority now represents many more people. So we're kind of, fighting against the population expansion with that approach. And I think it just hasn't been effective enough. Like, I'm not against it, but I think that when we go for something like fur, we can actually unite with non-vegans even. And this is a really, really critical thing that I think is holding us back, is our inability to work with people who are, maybe are paying for some forms of animal harm or exploitation. But, we need them on our side. We need to find our common ground with them, or else we have very little chance of getting change, because I don't think the 1% of vegans or whatever it is currently are going to be able to convince the other 99% to go vegan. But maybe we can start to kind of expand the circles of compassion and mobilize people, and hopefully that creates a more powerful movement that can have bigger and bigger asks, or not asks, really bigger and bigger demands.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like I do like the idea of turning people vegan, but it's just not quick enough for me. I'm pretty impatient and I really want to help as many animals as we can very soon. And the turning people vegan just takes too long from my experience.
Yeah.
Like, most people aren't going to go vegan. Even if they do, they may not be as passionate about it. Like, the number of vegans who are not active is so high. So that means that even if you do turn someone vegan, they're probably not going to be active. And
Yeah.
then, yes, they are helping on the demand side, but we need a lot more momentum to bring these industries down. So, kind of going back to Marc Jacobs, how long had you been working on it, and what do you think it was that made you win? Like, was there a time that you felt the tide turning?
Yeah, I mean, personally, the first time I protested against Marc Jacobs was years ago, but I was only really working on this campaign in a focused way starting sometime last year, and and we didn't really come in with like focused pressure until this year. So there were certainly protests, there were some amazing actions taken, but I think that the attention of the anti-fur movement was spread around to a bunch of different targets. And unfortunately, the animal rights movement really isn't big enough to typically win campaigns if we're focused on a whole ton of different targets. We do need to focus up, and that honestly, that is one reason as well that I promote getting involved in fur activism, just because it's a thing that a bunch of people are working on, that we have a good strategy behind, and we need to focus in on a small number of things, or we're going to win probably nothing. So in terms of the timeline, I think we started home demos, I want to say in like February or March, maybe it was March. And that was a real shift in the campaign. By home demo, sorry, I mean protesting outside the homes of like executives, generally speaking, as opposed to just doing store protests and office protests, which had been happening off and on for quite some time, many years, in fact. And in terms of what you asked, what won it, right?
Yeah, well, kind of just going back to the thing about unity. Yeah, there's this old story that I like, or it's like a saying, like if you hit a tree with an axe 1,000 times in different places, the tree's never going to come down. But if you hit it in the same spot every time, then the tree will come down. So yeah, I think that remaining focused is super important. And yeah, home demos I think are great because when people are at work, they're just trying to pass the time. So if there's some people protesting, yes, it's annoying. Yes, it's going to hurt their sales, but it's not going to really fucking piss them off. But if someone's outside your house and you're trying to relax, say you've had a long day at work, you're going to be a lot more pissed off. So do you basically just go outside their houses with megaphones and do like essentially the same thing you would do at a store? Or is there anything else?
Yeah, I'd say that's basically it. Obviously you want to check the laws in whatever area you're in because it varies by location. But it really is that they can be oftentimes a little bit more peppy than your typical demo. Sometimes, the neighbors come out and, try to start things with you. Or actually, at our first home demo, it was probably the craziest one I've been at. The target's husband, who's also a very high level executive at a different corporation, comes out, is like trying to fight people and then steals an activist's phone.
Oh,
And he
wow.
actually got arrested for it, which was just crazy. I'd never seen anything like that happen in activism. Normally if an arrest is made, it doesn't go in our favor.
Yeah. Were they like
So
filming and he grabbed it or
yeah, so he had a weird moment where like I don't know, he did something pretty weird where he like dragged his like daughter out of the house, and it looked it was concerning looking, and this
Mm,
activist was filming that,
mm.
and I think he was trying to say like you're scaring my daughter or something, but it's like, dude, you're dragging your
Yeah,
daughter
you're
out of the
literally
house, like
abusing her.
yeah, it was
Damn.
very
Was she like
physically
a
rough.
kid?
She was a kid, yeah. He was very
Yeah.
rough, and so that was really concerning. And I think that activist had the video. I don't know if this is why he took the phone, but I think that activist was the one who had the full video of it. I caught like a second on my phone, but not enough.
I'm sure that's gotta be the reason, right? Like,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
so. But and so he takes the activist's phone and then tries to lie to the police and say he didn't or whatever, but
yeah.
or like that he gave it back. Like the story kept changing, and then eventually the story changed to it's in like a sewer 2 blocks away. So he did ultimately have to pay for the activist's phone, which was
Did he
good.
put it in the sewer? Like, he actually threw it in the sewer?
We think he sent someone else out to put it in the sewer,
Okay. That's so weird.
because we didn't see him leave the house, so we think he sent someone else out. My speculation is it was his wife, who was the vice president at Marc Jacobs, but for legal reasons, I should clarify that that is my speculation. So,
That's so weird. It reminds me of this time. I had this crazy roommate once when I was living in Nashville, and she stole my other roommate's phone. They were like dating, like a weird toxic thing. And she told me that she ran over it and it was completely broken. But then he had a phone tracking thing and we like went and found it in the woods. So she like threw it in the woods and then told me she'd run over it. And yeah, it was just weird. People are fucking crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, back to home demos. So how long do you typically stay at someone's house? Like 2 hours or?
Yeah, I think something like that's pretty standard. Sometimes though, we would just do, 10 minutes. We would just do like 10 crazy minutes and try to be as loud as possible. Obviously, I would never encourage any activity that isn't fully legal, but some places where they maybe have restrictions on megaphones, I've heard of activists doing 10 minutes with their megaphones that way and then kind of leaving that way they can avoid trouble about that, leaving before cops show up. Obviously I would never endorse that, but there's different things people do. So sometimes we would do a quick thing, sometimes it would be longer. But fortunately in New York City, home demos are legal as long as you stay on the public sidewalk. That's like the critical thing. You obviously can't go on their property, but they are legal in New York.
Perfect. Cool. So you said that the campaign was a bit unfocused and then we were able to get everyone to focus on it. How did that happen? Like how do you unite people?
That was the really difficult thing, and honestly, something that I don't think we did the best job of. I think that we had a lot of lessons learned about that, but we were really just trying to convince people of the logic of this campaign target versus any other target. And there was a really strong logic for why we would go for this for Marc Jacobs. There were reasons why it mattered so much. I think this is one of the most important anti-fur wins we've ever had, and simultaneously it was winnable, which was the other critical thing, because it would be amazing to go, be a brand that basically just sells fur. But we're not likely to do that right now with what we have because it's too big of an ask. So a winnable campaign combined with a campaign that has a lot of influence, if it is one. And we were really just trying to get people on board, trying to convince some of the logic of it. I think like you want to make it look cool as well. So we did, we put in some energy to getting those social media videos out there, and a lot of those are it's kind of two purposes. One, so to make sure that the targets are seeing what you're doing, to make sure that Marc Jacobs International can understand what your protests look like. And you might protest someone who wasn't home. Like, it's hard to predict that. So you still want them to see the video and realize that all their neighbors saw them getting protested for being complicit in animal abuse. So there's that purpose. But then the other purpose, to your question, is kind of, show activists that this is an exciting thing, that this is something you might want to be a part of. And maybe it's unfortunate that we feel like we need to do that, but I think it is part of it.
Yeah, so that is one of the things about social media, and I think that's why street outreach is so popular, is to do, because you get those fun videos that are, exciting and people like watching them. So I think having videos, I mean, I love watching those protest videos because they're like totally unhinged. Just get some like awesome music and people with megaphones, and like in reality, there's probably only what, like 4 or 5 people there, but when you cut it together with music, it actually looks really cool.
Yeah. Um,
Cool. So as far as uniting people, like getting campaigns that they're excited about,
yeah.
yeah, it does seem like so I had originally titled this stream, "This is why the vegan movement is failing," and I changed the title just because I wanted people to know we were talking about Marc Jacobs. But the kind of thing we hypothesized when we were talking about this yesterday is part of the reason that we're failing is because we are so unfocused and because people just want such different things. And yeah, some people just only want to turn everyone vegan. Some people think that, yeah, we shouldn't do fur campaigns at all. Or then if the people who do want to do fur campaigns, there are different companies that they're trying to target. So yeah, I think being able to like inspire people and unite them is really important. So how do you personally stay motivated?
It can be difficult, and there's definitely times. I definitely had a week or two during this campaign where I felt a lot less motivated. I think you caught me on a little bit of a bad week a couple weeks ago at the conference. Because you just do have your ups and downs, and also to the last question, a really important thing is bringing groups together, like bringing other different animal rights groups together, and sometimes that goes really well, sometimes it doesn't. And when it doesn't, like, I actually find that one of the most demotivating things is not so much like dealing with the target, dealing with whatever they're trying to throw at you, but dealing with like trying to get people on board and trying to get everybody to work with each other, because there's a lot of it's activism, and I think for every social justice movement there's a lot of big personalities and people who have different ideas, and that can be tough, but in terms of staying motivated, maybe the biggest thing is just being around people who are motivated and excited about it. And I know that's like kind of like, I don't know, maybe that's like bro podcast advice. You are the sum of the
The
you know
five people that you spend the most time with. Yeah.
yeah, but I think that there is truth to it, and those people can kind of pick you up when you're lacking the motivation, and they can at least keep you putting one foot in front of the other. Because definitely a lot of this was like, I think there was a lot of protests where no one felt motivated, and we were just like, we just have to kind of put one foot in front of the other and trust the process that this is going to work.
Yeah, I always feel so fired up after I've spent time with like you and Mike and like that whole crew. It really helps to have people that you're with on a daily basis. And that's one thing that sucks that I don't really have in New Orleans. I definitely get it like through work over Zoom and going to Denver soon. So I'll have that. But just having people around you is, yeah, it's so amazing. So anyone who's a lonely vegan, I feel for you, but there is hope, and you can do a lot of virtual stuff. Like whenever fur campaigns are going on, just try to call the stores and engage with the posts on Instagram and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, let's say there's a protest, right? And people go and it's like boring. Is there anything you do to try to like lift people's spirits like afterward?
Yeah, I mean, afterward and during, I'll sometimes be a little silly at protests. I'll give these like really absurd little speak out moments during the protest, and a lot of the time, part of the point is just to like get people re-energized. I'll kind of say something a little silly. We have like these noisemakers, and I have this one noisemaker that I bring out. It just sounds ridiculous. It sounds like a duck call or something, and I'll bring that out when I feel like the energy's down, just to get a laugh. So sometimes even just being funny, or trying to be funny at least, can be something during the protest. Uh, like I have seen energy often turn around pretty quickly, or even if just one person's like the person leading chants maybe really like gets fired up all of a sudden, I'll see the energy of the whole group kind of go up. So trying to be that person at a protest, and you can totally be that whether or not you're the organizer or whatever. But I think after the protests, I also just like to go out to eat and kind of like debrief with people. And it's nice to like socialize with good people after you've had bad people yell at you for a while, you know?
Yeah, you can bitch about them. Yeah, I
Yeah.
love that about because the leader kind of like sets the tone, right? And you don't
Yeah.
have to be the leader. You can just be a person who's there. And I like to come into situations with just slightly more energy than what people kind of consider socially acceptable there. So, like, if you're at a dinner, bring like party energy. If you're at a
Mm,
party, bring nightclub energy. And
yes.
yeah, just kind of like think like how can I make people feel like a bit more inspired and have a bit more fun is always good. Um so let's say there's someone watching now and maybe they're afraid to go to a protest, or they don't think that's their thing, or they don't really want to disrupt people or annoy people. What would you say to that person?
I totally get that. I actually I think I don't look this way in videos. I put on a real front of, angry and passionate and whatever, but I actually really hate conflict. I don't like it if people are upset at me. It's just not like, so I might have been a person who would have kind of looked at this type of thing a while back and said, oh, that's not for me. But I, I think it's not as bad as people think, and you get used to it really quickly. Like it really quickly. Like after I think like three protests, a lot of people who are pretty passive people, you see them getting into it. And regardless, there's always a way to contribute. So we have people who come out to demos who like their voice isn't, they can't be screaming through a megaphone, so they're just there with a sign, maybe a whistle, and that's a way to contribute. There's so many ways to get involved in a campaign like this. And it's not hard to stand on a sidewalk with a sign and like just keeping in mind what the individuals we're advocating are going through. I think also gives a little bit of perspective there. But if it's really not you to go to a protest, I would still challenge everyone. Try, go to a few, see how it goes. You might start to find that you hate it less over time, or maybe even at times enjoy it. Um, but there's also like a lot of ways to get involved in a campaign like this. I mean, we did a really cool collaboration with a street artist named Praxis, and he made these like amazing posters that were targeting Marc Jacobs that then some anonymous activists apparently put up all over New York City. And that's something that I think was actually meaningful to the campaign. And that's not a protest. That's not in, you don't have to yell to do that. So there are like ways to get involved. I would say still reach out, but challenge your boundaries a little bit too.
Yeah, yeah. Another kind of bro podcast would be uh growth happens at the edge of your comfort zone or
I
something
should
like
have
that.
said that. Come on. You can put that to me in like the private chat, and so I can, say it next time.
I'll send you inspirational quotes. Just
Yeah,
pretend
yeah.
like you came up with that.
I should have like prepped with
But,
Joe Rogan before I came on here.
yeah, yeah. He would definitely be on board with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, what else was I going to say? There was something I don't remember. Oh yeah, like in terms of going to protests, like I don't really like protests. Like they're kind of boring. I don't really like standing. I tend to like pace. Like the yelling can be good. Sometimes it's fun to get your frustration and your anger out. But I still do it, right? Because like I know how important it is and it's actually not really that hard. And the best part of protests is that you get to see your friends and hang out with them afterward. So I think as long as there's that strong community with people who like each other, then the protest becomes like a lot easier to deal with psychologically. All right, we have a $10 donation from Sprinkle. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. That is going to go to Pro Animal Futures campaign, which will hopefully ban fur in Denver, which would be amazing. And Sprinkle says, science says eat beans, fruits, and vegetables. Social media people say eat meat and ghee. These fucking carnivore people on TikTok are driving me fucking insane. They're promoting raw milk like all the time, but it's actually gotten worse since the bird flu. Raw milk sales are up 22% since the avian bird flu because people think that if they drink it, they'll get immunity, which is not true. You could die doing that. So, yes, Sprinkle, you are 100% right. Let's eat our beans and our fruits and our vegetables.
I'll throw in, I grew up drinking raw milk, believe it or not.
Uh, I
And
absolutely believe that.
I hate to say this, but I'm not immune to the flu. So it doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Why did you drink raw milk growing up?
Well, my family was pretty crunchy.
Yeah.
So, we actually, it wasn't legal in the state I grew up in. So we were getting it shipped in from like Pennsylvania, which is crazy.
Was it
But I
Amish?
think Yeah, we were getting it from like a Mennonite farm. But I think that there was just like a lot of misinformation out there about supposed health benefits and how the pasteurization kills all the, all the good stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's not true. Raw milk is like very dangerous. And even apart from like the horrible stuff that happens to animals, I don't
Yeah.
recommend consuming that.
Okay, so no raw milk according to
No raw
Mark.
milk. Yeah.
We have a question for me, which I'd love to get your take on as well, Mark. Leah asks, Natalie, what do you think about small local animal farmers? Killers are being promoted on the End Factory Farms in Sonoma website. What do you think about that, Mark?
I didn't actually know that small local farmers are being promoted. I mean, I'll probably give a take that's a little unpopular here. I don't think we should promote animal agriculture of any kind, really. But simultaneously, I do think that we should work with absolutely anyone who will work with us, even if that means a small time animal farmer. This movement is just too small to get the important victories we need on our own most of the time. And so I'm supportive of working with whoever, including animal farmers, if that's how we can get change. If there's something we align on, then let's work on that. That would be my opinion.
Yeah, I disagree slightly. So as far as the small local animal farmers being promoted on their website, I didn't know about that. That's really weird. Pro Animal Future would not do that. I will say that. But one thing that I think is interesting is that even these small farms, like when there are these ballot initiatives to ban factory farms, they are against it because they see it as a threat to agriculture overall, which it is. So I just don't think that we're going to get the support of them really. Like maybe if we actually were, I might change my mind on that. But yeah, all the farmers, the small farmers that I've talked to, they overall just want things to be the same. Like they would like to make more money, so they may want to end factory farming from that perspective, but they're not going to support these big ballot initiatives. And at the end of the day, they see animals as objects and as profit, and that's never going to change. So yeah, I don't like that. I don't know why they're doing that. I will check out the website though, just to make sure. Um, yes, someone else had a question. Gary Francione argues single issue campaigns, abbreviated SICs, like the anti fur protests, are speciesist. I agree with his thinking. Animal leather is no less an important issue. Is Mark an abolitionist? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am an abolitionist, but I think that we have to have a strategy, right? And I don't think that an abolitionist in any other area would take this perspective. I think this is a very unique perspective, and that is being held here in animal rights. I was speaking yesterday to someone who's talking about welfare campaigns, which I know are even less popular. But he was saying, no, he's a prison abolitionist. He's like a prison abolitionist, and he spent a lot of time in jail. And he was saying that like there is a difference in your experience of, let's say, a tiny prison cell versus a large one. And while that might not be what people want to focus on, no prison abolitionist would oppose legislation that makes the conditions in a prison better, right? Generally speaking, even if they are still saying, like, obviously this is not an acceptable environment and we're trying to get rid of the whole thing. So I think single issue campaigns have been one of the only things we've been winning on. If there's a great strategy for total animal liberation going on that doesn't involve this, that's been shown to work, I would be so excited. Please send that to me. But just historically, like we have to do what works, and these single issue campaigns bring together a broader coalition of people. I know hunters who are against factory farming fur, right? And we can bring people together who agree on this. Back in the 90s in DC, there was a 25,000 person march for animals.
That's wild.
I
We
think,
never get those numbers now.
yeah, and I'm sure it was mostly non-vegans who we united with because we agreed on some specific issues, and certainly disagreed on other issues.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the anti fur thing is speciesist. Like, I get what you're saying, how animal leather is no less important. I think animal leather is obviously terrible and it's such a huge industry. I just think that where we have public support, we should lean into it. And I dislike kind of the personal purity stuff, like, oh, someone has to think this, otherwise we won't work with them. I think that we can work with people we don't like, and I think we should work with people we don't like. There are a lot of people in the animal rights movement that I don't like, that I disagree with on a lot of things. But if we're both trying to get animal liberation, like that's our goal at the end of the day for everyone. There's this concept in psychology called the narcissism of small differences, where the more a group has in common, the more they over focus on their differences. And I think that it definitely holds us back. And yeah, we already kind of touched on why fur is so important. Seasoned vegan. So definitely make sure to watch the beginning of the stream as well. Next question. What is the difference between AAM and ADL?
AAM stands for Animal Activism Mentorship. They're a mentorship group that connects new or inexperienced activists with experienced mentors. And ADL stands for Animal Defense League. There are actually a bunch of groups that use this name. It's a bit of a generic name. I'm guessing that this is a reference to the New York City Animal Defense League, which is just a specific group that works on anti-fur campaigns, I think, as well as maybe other campaigns too.
Nice. Yeah, I didn't realize ADL was more broad because I only know the people who do it in New York City.
There's also like a Los Angeles Animal Defense League. So yeah, there's a number of ones.
Sweet. So now that you won the Marc Jacobs thing, which is absolutely amazing, where are you going to turn your focus to next?
So what we're going into now is a campaign against Max Mara. Max Mara is a pretty large international brand that sold a lot of fur. And the Europeans have really been working on it pretty hard for a while now. And there's also some actions, I think, maybe early last year and maybe the year before in the United States against Max Mara. So there have been actions in the United States, but again, not really in that focused way. And I think we keep coming back to that because the focus is so critical. Yeah. So the hope is we can help Europe out with this campaign. You know, Max Mara is an Italian brand, so the European activists are really critical to this. But if we can get a win there, and they do seem like a very vulnerable brand for a lot of reasons to me. So if we can get a win there, then that frees up the Europeans to work on any other campaigns. And at this point, most of our anti-fur targets are based in Europe. A lot of the targets that were selected early on were selected because they were winnable just by activists in like the US and Canada. And we're just running out of major targets that fit that description.
We've done our work.
Yeah, so we really want to be supportive here of what the Europeans are doing and the incredible progress that they've made on the Max Mara campaign. And that's kind of where we're going next. We were at a protest yesterday in Connecticut. We were protesting a event that was sponsored by Max Mara. And these are the kind of tactics we used a lot during the Marc Jacobs campaign, where we kind of protested anyone connected to our target. And that can feel weird. It can feel ugly. You know, people don't like it. But on the bright side, we don't really get in the media at all anyway. So, you know, people can dislike it all they want. It's not really the point. It really is impactful on these companies when this event that they're sponsoring to try to greenwash their image and look good, now they're getting embarrassed at by anti-fur activists. So
yeah, I mean, people like pay money to go to these things, right? And then if they have a bad time, like that's not going to look good.
Yeah, no, people pay thousands of dollars to go to this event.
Yeah. 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 What is that called? It's like targeting secondary or tertiary targets. Like there's
exactly. Like secondary targeting. Yeah. and yeah, this was really critical in the Marc Jacobs campaign. I think that we really only started doing this at the very end, but I think it sent the message that more was coming. We targeted a couple brands that had done a collaboration with Marc Jacobs. So these are brands that sell absolutely no fur themselves, but they collaborated with Marc Jacobs, and we're saying anyone who collaborated is getting protested. And that's the kind of thing that a very image focused brand like Marc Jacobs just cannot tolerate. And
Yeah.
I think that they dropped like shortly after two of those types of protests.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, they can't the last thing they want is to look bad, right? So if you
Yeah.
just make them look bad, then you're doing your job. So someone asked, where does Max Mara sell fur?
That's a question that's more complicated than it was a few weeks ago. A really exciting development is that they've pulled it off their websites in like many of the European countries. I know I've still seen it in Japan and Korea, but they've recently pulled it from a lot of their sites. Now, we don't want to ease up. If anything, that should encourage us that the campaign's looking winnable. But sometimes this can be a thing that happens where brands sort of temporarily stop doing the thing you're protesting them for, because they can then make you look a little ridiculous, like, oh, it's not on our website. And, Marc Jacobs was definitely doing that.
Oh yeah.
But then once the pressure eases up, they go back to selling just as much. So you really want to get that commitment publicly that they're not going to be selling it again.
Yeah, same with foie gras too, right? Like they'll drop it from the menu and then put it back on there. So you want to make sure that they agree to your terms.
Yeah.
Lauren asks, I can only get 3 to 5 people to come to my actions. What kind of numbers does a group need to make a difference?
I actually think 3 to 5 is phenomenal. Like I said, a lot of our demos here in New York City, which is massive, we're pretty small. I think one person is enough. More is always great, but one person, you could go chalk. You could go, buy a megaphone for, $40 online, and you could go cause some trouble with that. It really is a situation where the more actions matter more than more people. And if you're like one person in the middle of nowhere and you're able to help with a campaign, that kind of sends a message. It makes it look like we're everywhere. It makes the campaign look way stronger. So I think that, 3 to 5 is great. The more is always better, but one is enough.
One is enough. Wow.
Yeah. I've definitely done one-person protests before, and I think that they're effective.
Really? Like you just went somewhere?
Yeah, I like, I've done a little disruptions, went into a store with a megaphone and a sign. Obviously do that at your own risk, but I've never had an issue with it. I think Amanda from Animal Rights Initiative, she was telling me she used to do these protests, maybe she still does, where it was just her. So she would have like 2 easels next to her on the sidewalk, and she'd have a sign on each easel, and she's holding a sign, and it's, it's a one woman show. And nice. I think it's great. Yeah.
That is great. I just feel like it's so much harder to do something on your own than with a few people. The one we did in New Orleans, it was a disruption. We had 2 people, and that was good. Definitely. It's hard because it's like in a mall. Well, you've come to New Orleans. You were going to do a protest here, but then you had too crazy of a night on Bourbon Street.
Oh, no. Yeah, no, I think I do remember that. I don't remember that night well, but I remember something about it. Yeah.
Just kind of like, can we give a basic rundown of like what exactly pressure campaigns are? Because I know it's a term a lot of people have heard, but may not know like what exactly it involves.
Yeah, it's pretty simple. It's, I don't know what the actual definition is, but it's, pressuring a target, oftentimes a corporation, to do something for you. And you're using things that are going to bother them. And hopefully that what you're doing is going to bother them more than doing what you're asking. So if a brand only sells a little bit of fur and you're causing chaos outside their stores all the time, they may say like, hey, like, maybe we make a little bit of extra money because we sell this fur, but is it worth it? Is it worth dealing with these crazy people over selling a few fur items? So I don't actually know what the definition is, but I think that the big idea would be apply more pressure than what they're doing is worth. So a bad target for a pressure campaign might be a fur store, because they're going to look at that and say like, well, you're basically asking us to go out of business. So, and you probably cannot put enough pressure on them, at least not through legal means, to get them to go fully out of business. A street protest is probably not going to be enough for that. So that would probably be a pretty bad target for a pressure campaign. It's really about making sure you can put more pressure on them than what they're doing that you don't like is worth to them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the situation in Denver. I believe a lot of the stores that sell fur, that's like what they do, is mostly fur. So yeah, that's part of why we're going the ballot initiative route
Yeah.
there. So let's
I
do
just actually Googled it, and there was a thing I should emphasize. It's on a single target. So, if I was protesting a bunch of places randomly, like, oh, y'all, you should drop fur, that probably wouldn't really be a pressure campaign. That's almost more informational outreach at that point, because none of them are going to do it if you kind of split your focus up.
and that's kind of what the animal rights movement is doing at some level, is splitting their
Yeah.
focus up like that. So yeah, just having the same target, because yes, there are not that many vegans in terms of the population or activists in terms of the population, but there are so many animal activists across the world that our numbers do actually become really high when we are focused on one thing. So
Yeah.
let's say hypothetically we win, there's no more fur in the world, it's banned all over. Then what would you say the next step should be?
Yeah, I think it's in the same way that we target fur, where we've really started with companies that are easier targets. Maybe they don't sell a ton of fur or whatever makes them more vulnerable. I think we do the same thing with an industry where we say fur is maybe the most vulnerable large scale animal exploitation industry. Like, what's the next in line? I personally am kind of interested in foie gras. I've done like a fair bit of work on that myself. I think it's a great one to get involved with if you live in a place that doesn't have good fur targets. Like right now we're doing Max Mara. So if you don't have a Max Mara, you don't have Max Mara employees who live anywhere near you. Obviously, as I think Jeremy mentioned in the comments, you can still get involved in terms of online comments, phone calls. There's a number of things you could do. If you have a special skill like video editing and you want to volunteer your time, you could do that. But I think something like foie gras could be good. I'm not necessarily saying that's what it is, but another low-hanging fruit industry that most people are against, that it may not
Only
take.
for rich people.
Yeah, it's we kind of got fur with that too, where it's like you pretty much have to be rich to care about fur, and it's the
Yeah.
same with foie gras. I've never explained foie gras to someone and had them support foie gras after the conversation, so it's
I
really
have.
easy to message around.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just a lot easier, and I think as we do that, we build momentum and we build power and we build a model for how we can get total animal liberation industry by industry. It is about abolition, but we have to take it one step at a time.
Yeah, I mean, I think that anytime you're trying to be successful in life, you need to break it down into the smaller steps. Even something like getting in shape, right? You're not going to just go to the gym one day and be in amazing shape. You're going to have to start at a lower weight and then go to a higher weight. So this, like looking at things like this, it could just be we're getting in shape for that final battle. I think about it in terms of video games. Like there's the fur boss and the foie gras boss, and then eventually we'll get to the meat boss. But we can't beat the meat boss if we haven't done these other ones. And yeah, I mean, this foie gras, it's like a signal group, and there's phone actions you can take. So they're like, call this restaurant at this time, and they make it super easy. You just call the number. And for anyone who wants to do foie gras stuff, this is my favorite technique. You call and you do a takeout order and you ask for a bunch of really weird shit. And then at the end, you say, "Oh, I see you have foie gras on the menu. Actually, let me cancel it." And then that makes them a lot more mad than if you just say that you want them to ban foie gras right away, because a lot of these goals are to keep them on the phone as long as you can. So think like, how can I annoy people who work in this restaurant? And I am not like you. I actually love pissing people off. It's definitely like in my nature. I think it's super fun. I think prank calls are super fun. So yeah, I highly recommend anyone who doesn't live in a city with a lot of stuff to still get involved online on Instagram. There's always comment storms. Follow Animal Activism Mentorship on Instagram. They post stuff like this a lot. What are some other organizations that people could follow?
Definitely check out CAFT USA if you're interested in fur campaigns. They also put out some information about activism stuff more generally. I think we're going to have some more posts about that coming up, but they're a great group to get involved in. I think I have a link as well, which maybe I can put in the chat. Let's see if I'm able to do that. Oh, wait. Oh, no. It wants me to connect to YouTube. Okay. Well, I'm just going to read the link and someone
Send it
else.
to me in the private chat, and then I'll.
Oh, perfect.
Did that
Okay.
work?
Yeah, I'm sending it to you. That's a great one to follow. I totally second the animal activism mentorship one. And if you're a newer activist, I think they're a great group to reach out to because they can kind of get you connected into something effective. And, and they'll kind of know what's in your area and what's not. So that's pretty helpful. Yeah. Or reach out to Natalie. Natalie
Yep.
will help you.
Yeah, if you reach out to me on Instagram, is definitely the best place to reach me. Otherwise, I will probably not respond. So if you don't have Instagram, you got to get it. Otherwise, I'm not going to respond to you. But you can message Natalie Fulton Official, and I will get back to you. Someone asked, "Can we do anything about shark finning from the United States?" Do you know anything about that?
I actually don't know enough about that to comment on it, to be honest. I don't know. You could probably try to get, maybe a local restaurant to take it off the menu. I don't know about from like maybe a legislative side if there's something that could be done. I don't know, Natalie, you might know more than me on that, honestly.
Yeah, I don't know how common shark finning is. I would imagine that I know it's a pretty big problem in Asia, so I would imagine they have some animal rights groups that are focused on that. So I would probably recommend trying to connect with them and have them point you in the right direction. Um, Someone asks, well, yeah, what were you gonna say?
On that note, I was just Googling, and it does seem like a ban passed in the US.
Oh,
I
cool.
don't know if it's gone into effect yet, but so maybe it needs more research, but maybe things will be good on that front from a US side. I would also say that a lot of time it's harder to pressure external countries. So I've seen some protests like outside embassies for specific types of animal abuse, and I got to be real. I don't think that those protests do anything. I don't think that the countries care.
Yeah, I guess I meant more like if the groups are like calling people in the country, like, can you like just do what they're doing virtually?
I probably would suggest like going with like international campaigns or at least targets in your local area. I think you'll just have more tools to be effective because if they're not caving to the phone calls, if they figure out a way to block your phone calls or your emails, then it's kind of all over. So, think about like where you have a lot of resources and ability to escalate because if you can't escalate to in-person stuff, it is just harder to do this. I do
Yeah.
totally agree, though, that these digital actions are effective in collaboration with like an effective campaign.
Yeah, that's fair. And another idea I like is just that you have the most power like in your local neighborhood. That I kind of got that from this book called Change, which was really good. And the more we can kind of clean up the area around us, the more effective we'll be with like these bigger targets. So yeah, I think starting in your local community, if you don't have one, then that's different. But if you do have one, definitely start there. The other thing is that I see a lot of vegans complaining about like not having vegan friends or not being able to date vegans. And if you're complaining about that and you're in a city that does have activism, then that's the easy way to solve that problem. Like if you go to activism stuff, you're going to make so many vegan friends. You're going to hang out all the time because you'll be doing protests and it's really just so much fun. Like I absolutely love all the people I've met through activism, like you and Lauren and like all these other people. And, it's almost like you enter the social sphere with like a strong bond already because you have these similar values. And that's just like so powerful. So, anyone watching, I highly encourage you to get involved with your local scene.
Yeah, 100%. And if you don't have a local scene, you might be able to start one. Feel free to reach out to activists. Activists generally want to help you. They generally want to talk to you and get you involved. I can't think of a lot of activists who will like hate to hear from you, especially you can reach out to someone like me who I'm not constantly inundated with social media things as a non-celebrity and non-juggler.
It's all the juggling, baby.
Yeah, but people will totally help you either get something started or they'll tell you what's in your area.
What's your Instagram? I'll put it in the chat.
Oh, I wish I knew.
It's got some weird numbers or something.
Yeah, let's take a look.
You don't even know your Instagram.
I don't know my own. Why would I know my own Instagram? Like,
that's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's mark.mark.55.
.mark.55. All right, it's in the chat. So yeah, definitely shoot Mark a message. Because I don't know if you really kind of organized the DC group or if the DC group was already going when you got involved, but like there's like a really solid group there. I know you're in New York now, but eventually you'll be going back to DC. So yeah, it's just been very good work there.
Thanks. Yeah, the DC group is awesome, and there's some really cool other organizers there too. So yeah, if you're anywhere near DC, you should definitely, or if you're passing through, you should definitely reach out and do a protest.
Hell yeah. Sweet. Well, Louis asked one more question. What about focus campaigning against rodeos in places where rodeos are prevalent? What do you think about that?
I think if you need to have an angle, that's the big thing. So like if you protest a rodeo, they're not going to stop being a rodeo. Maybe you could get some kind of a ban or something in your local town that could make sense. Or if there's something that they're really dependent on. I've heard of some really interesting efforts where people like shut down rodeos by banning, I think it was like a cattle prod or something like that the rodeo was really dependent on, that most people agree is cruel. And so the rodeos kind of just shut down in those areas because as much as they lied and said that they didn't need these, instruments of torture, they really did. And so there might be some creative strategies that you could do with something like that. But yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, because like all these industries, they're like, oh, we don't do anything bad. We're nice to the animals. And then obviously it's not true. That's really cool. It also like works to expose them, right? So
Yeah.
that's another reason I'm excited about factory farm bans, is because there's so many, companies that like pretend like they're these small little farmers, and this is going to expose them, because then it'll be like, oh, why are you so worried about this, right? And
Yeah.
I know, like, obviously I'm 100% abolitionist and against all animal farming, but bringing down that facade, I think, is going to be really powerful in terms of influencing the public. So that's why I support it.
Yeah, you welfarist scum.
Yeah. Hey, people say that, and like, it's fine for them to say that. I don't consider myself welfarist at all. So,
I am very excited to join you for Slaughter Free September. Yeah.
Yes, I don't know if I've officially announced Slaughter Free September, but we can do that.
Disaster.
It's okay. It was a disaster. No, so we were just thinking like we do want to plan it, but like tasks expand to fill the time you have for them. So we're like, okay, it's probably going to take maybe a month and a half to like really put this together. So if we start planning now, it's going to take the entire time to September. But yes, Slaughter Free September, for anyone who doesn't know, is that Pro Animal Future is going to be hosting activists at Airbnbs in Denver, and you can stay there for free. Food is covered as long as you do voter outreach for 3 hours a day on weekends, 2 hours every other weekday, because we really want to get this initiative passed, and we really want to bring a lot of activists in. You'll get to hang out with me and Mark, and it's going to be super fucking fun. And yeah, we're both really stoked about it.
Awesome. Can't wait.
Hell yeah. Sweet. All right. Well, I guess that's all the questions, but thanks again for coming on. I think this is really good, and I hope that people are feeling inspired to take action. And yeah, just want to reiterate that we want to help, and we really do think this stuff is so important. And in terms of the fur industry, just what's happening to these animals is so bad and it's heartbreaking. And if you do want to learn more about it, check out that documentary Slay I mentioned earlier. It's free on Tubi. And it's just really good, and it's heartbreaking to see these animals, but the good news is that we can help stop it.
Yeah. And please get involved. We really need the help. I can't tell you how much of a difference like 5 new activists makes to this movement. Reach out. You can reach out to me. You can reach out to caftusa.org/action. But we really need more people on board. And I think that this is a way we can build a model for animal liberation. So thanks for having me on, Natalie. Great to see you.
You too. All right. Goodbye, everyone.